Hello everyone, my name is Christian. Welcome back to my hobby blog. Today I'm going to be reviewing Rebecca Yarros' Fourth Ring. Uh, Quick note, I ended up DNFing this. I got about a quarter of the way through this book. I usually give a book about 50% before I decide to DNF, but this book was not for me whatsoever. I DNF'd it around page 120 or so. Chapter 10, maybe chapter 11. I just do not care at all for anything in this book. I found the writing to be awful. I found the prose to be very wordy and run on sentence heavy. There were many times yesterday, because I started the book yesterday, I read 100 pages through many hours. And usually it takes me about an hour or two to read that many pages if the book is engaging to me. But this book, it would take me 2 hours to read like 30 to 40 pages. And that was because nothing sticks with me when I'm reading this book, because nothing is explained that well. The prose, again, is just awful to read. The writing is not good. None of the characters are interesting whatsoever. I was vaguely interested in what Violet was doing, but she is just the most annoying main character that I've read in a very long time. She's a much worse version of Ren from the Poppy Boy, because this book heavily reminded me of the Poppy Boy series, but mostly book one, where we're going through this school for dragon riding, and so many people die during this, which is whatever. It's a fantasy, I guess, ritual, rite of passage. So it's not too big of a, I guess, issue for me, but the amount of people that die during these tests in the beginning and just the outright hostility that everybody has for each other to try and become the dragon rider, like, I just did not like reading anything with the characters during that section where everyone's trying to kill each other in front of everybody and no one cares. Like, none of these superior officers, because most of this book is related to a military school. The military aspects are very front and center. That's really the only thing that the writer seems concerned with. All the fantasy aspects are put to the back. The dragons are never on page. When they are on page, they don't do anything. They just stand there menacingly. But, like, none of the characters I enjoyed reading at all. Violet was just a much worse version of Ren, and I did not care for Ren at all. I thought Poppy Boy was pretty awful. Book one was awesome, and then it just nosedived so hard. But, yeah, Fourth Ring, I think the biggest issue I have with it is the fact that it seems embarrassed to be a fantasy novel. Because my favorite thing about the fantasy genre is world building, the lore, the history, all the fantasy creatures, all of that. And all of that is stripped away to the bare minimum while reading this book. None of the dragons are really expanded upon whatsoever. There's a lot of, like, tropey things going on in this story as well that have, like, if you've read anything that involves like a magic school or military school and fantasy, you've read everything that's already in this book. Because I was going through the Goodreads comments or reviews because I want to see what other people were thinking before doing this review, and that was something that I found pretty prevalent, is that there was a few people who just listed out all of the different aspects of this book that seemingly were just lifted from other stories. And the ones that I could catch on to myself were like Game of Thrones, with the magical barrier that is blocking the enemy army from coming into the capital lands or whatever, the Westerlands and Game of Thrones, and I don't even remember the continent or the country name in here, but the other side has griffins, which is really cool, but I don't know, just everything is stripped down to the bare minimum so we can focus on the romance. That there's nothing romantic about any of this because our main character is falling in love with this character named Zayden, who is the most toxic, just shitty guy, and I don't see any reason why she would want to be with him. He is constantly belittling her, constantly just overpowering her, because the last scene that I read before I decided to give up was when Zayden and I almost called her Ren, when Zayden and Violet are dueling, because, and by the way, Violet is a piece of shit because she decided to poison all of her competitors, because most of this book is her going through trials and trials. It kind of feels like the Goblet of Fire, or the I forget what it's called, but the trials from Poppy Boy and Ender's Game and a little bit of Skyward. I don't know if she read any of Brandon Sanderson's Skyward, but there were many scenes that felt like it was lifted from that. And I really did not like the part where our character gleefully puts hallucinogenic mushrooms into people's food so they can get poisoned and just very easily overpowered, because throughout the entire story, every other sentence that she utters is, wow, I'm just so small. I don't have any strength. I need to use my brain and my wits and, get, advantage that way. But none of it matters because she always cheats anyways. And I was thinking about Cradle while reading this book, because there's a lot of portions in that book where Reishi Linden in the first one, he's going through the exact same sort of trials that our character here is going through, dueling other people and having to win wrestling matches. And what he does in that story is that he cheats in a way that doesn't, I guess, drug people without the consent. I don't like that at all. I don't know if anyone who is watching this has been on shrooms, but taking too many shrooms is not something you want to do. And she was just very matter-of-factly like, yeah, I put a handful of hallucinogenic mushrooms into my competitor's food. Oh, and I did it again. Oh, and I did it again. Oh, and I did it again. Every person that she fights is too sick to fight her and duel her. And no one notices except Zayden somehow, because he's the only one who should be allowed to know this information. Because I guess everyone else who has been watching her duel is brain dead, because I don't know how nobody noticed every single one of her competitors being sick and having to go to the doctors because they are hallucinating and tripping balls. Like, I don't think the author knows what hallucinogenics do, because reading that part just really angered me, because if anybody drugged me that way and was able to continue and win just based off of that, I would kick their ass, because it is a terrifying experience going through shrooms when you don't know what you're getting into. And it is not, I just did not like that at all. I hated that. I really turned against her. I think she's a villain. She has no regard for anybody else. She's constantly hungering after every man, even though she thinks to herself, is this bad that I'm falling in love with Zayden, even though he's toxic? And I was like, one far away, okay? You should not be attracted to this guy. This guy is shitty. You need to get away from him. He is awful. And I have a feeling that the rest of the story is just going to be our main characters realizing that they're supporting the bad guys, and that the real good sides is actually the Griffins, because that's just it's being spelled out from a million miles away, because everyone who is part of the Griffin Army country, who have been brought into this military school, they all hate everybody involved with the dragons, and they think it is absolutely just awful to be there, but they're meeting secretly, so they're kind of like, okay, we're going to at least do something about this. And that was the only storyline that I was moderately interested in, was this story of Zayden and Imogen, I believe her name is. Everybody meeting together to sort of do this undercover, like, reconnaissance for the Griffin army. Like, I thought that was fun. I enjoyed that. But everything else in this book, I don't care about whatsoever. And I think my rating is a 2 out of 10. It would be a 1 out of 10, but I don't think it's that bad. I just think it's very overhyped. A lot of people who read this, I feel like, don't want to actually read fantasy, because this book has all of the cliches of fantasy. And if you actually want to read fantasy, you would not be reading this YA drivel. You would be reading actual fantasy where they actually care about the prose, they care about the story, because this just feels like the main author just wanted to sell this book and make a lot of money by putting in every cliche, and her gambit worked out, because this is a best-selling novel, so I guess hats off to her, because that's a pretty good ploy. Because this book is just awful. I did not care for it whatsoever. The dragons were cool, but I have a feeling that, I mean, they just went on page, so I just feel like they're going to continue being off page, and I'm not reading this anymore. I don't care about this. I have better books to read, and I had everything that I wanted from this book in terms of what I wanted to talk about, because I don't want to read this anymore. I have better books to read. So I don't know if there's anything else to mention. I don't know. But yeah, I don't care for this book. I would not recommend it. I think it's all just a marketing ploy. I don't know. It just feels like it's fantasy for people who don't want to read fantasy. It's basically what it feels like. Because everyone who speaks very highly of this series doesn't read fantasy. Going through Goodreads, going through people who are 5-starring these books, it's all books just like this, within the genre, and they don't go outside of that. So, I mean, I guess it's a good thing that people are reading some fantasy, but it would be nice if these readers would branch out and go into the more original stuff, because this is just copy and pasting every trope and cliche in the genre. So, thank you all so much for watching, and please have a great rest of the day.